Happy Sunday, my friends. As you can see, it's been a relaxing day here in Casa de I Read to Relax. And I just wanted to go over sort of what I read in the month of November and share with you guys the goods, the bads, the in-betweens, the whatevers. So let's get cozy and let's jump right in. I read a total of 9 books in the month of November, which is about what my average is, so that's great. I also had 2 books that I DNF'd, so let me tell you about those first, and then we'll get into what I actually did read. So my Read It or Unhaul It book for the month of November was It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. And I mean, not only was this not a great seasonal read, when it got picked, I was kind of like, ooh, that's already strike one against it. But I have had this book since it was published, 2021. And I've tried to pick it up so many times because it's inspired by one of the characters from the TV show Schitt's Creek, which I think is amazing, but I just cannot bring myself to read this book. I just have never quite been in the right mood for it. And when I went to try and force myself to read this in November, I just couldn't do it. And that's the sign it's time for it to actually go. So It Happened One Summer is getting donated, and it's been unhauled from my collection. One of the books I did read in the month of November was Three Kings by Nikki Jefford, and this is book 3 in the Royal Conquest saga. It is the book that features the sister of the main character from the first 2 books, and I really like Mellaroo, the main character in this one, and I really liked this book. It's a fast-paced, spicy fantasy romance series, and this one has a couple of love interests. It does become a multi-partner relationship, just in case that's not your thing, but it has court politics, it has fairy creatures, it has like I said, romance. It's a fun, fast, easy to read series. They are I would say kind of like in that new adult area. So I really enjoyed this one. I enjoyed the first 2 books in the series. And then the other one that I DNF'd, this is the novella that comes after Three Kings, Holiday Crown. And I picked this one up, and like I said, it's a novella. I read the first 2 chapters and I was just like, this is not the book for me. I was all like, this is gonna be great. December, you know, it'll be a cute holiday novella, ties into the book I just finished. So I read it right at the end of November, or started to. And like I said, I read the first 2 chapters, hated it, and was like, why am I forcing myself to continue reading anything I'm not enjoying? So I decided to DNF this one. And for me, the reason was that the premise of this one starts out with Mellaroo, the main character from Three Kings, years later in her relationship with her multiple partners, and what they've decided they want for Christmas is to get pregnant again and bring a baby to the family as a gift. And it's not a trope for me. The sheer focus on just activities for procreation, not a thing for me, so I passed on this one. Yeah, it was a little disappointing after enjoying the other books, but I'm sure some people really, really, like that continuation. The family, with the main characters just wasn't for me. So, as I mentioned, I DNF'd those 2. I did really enjoy Three Kings. some of the other books that I read in November, I read the ebook, The Christmas Swap, and sorry, I'm consulting, by Sandy Barker. So this one was a cute ebook about three friends who decide, like, they've known each other for a very, very long time. They'll go on vacations together because they live in different parts of the world. One lives in Colorado, one lives in England, and one lives in Australia. And this year, they're all sort of unhappy for different reasons coming up to Christmas time. And they decide that they're going to literally swap, like, locations for Christmas. So one of them hates the cold, she's gonna go to Australia. One of them wants that super cozy small town village experience, so she's gonna go to that little village in England. And one really wants to experience sort of like that huge family, cold, perfect Christmas, so she's going to Colorado. The premise is really cute. I liked sort of the individual stories. I think my biggest problem was that all three of them felt sort of stunted because you're trying to cover all three stories in one. So one thing I really did like was that each of them meets a love interest at the location that they go to, but it's not a perfect, like, oh my God, I'm gonna move here and we're gonna fall in love and be together forever. There are different scenarios for each of them and different ways that they sort of work out what might happen next. So I really did like that aspect, and I believe I read online that there's a sequel, like a follow-up to this one. I didn't love it enough to read the next one. I've got too many other books that I want to read. This was like a 3.5-star book for me, maybe. It was cute. It had parts that I really, really enjoyed, but overall it just didn't wow me. So that's okay. Not every book's gonna be an all-time winner. One that I did really, really love is A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping by Sangu Mandana. This author wrote The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, which I also really, really loved. I had read in October Rewitched and wanted that cozy, low stakes, magical story, and thought I was gonna love it, and it just didn't quite do it for me. And then I picked this one up and I'm like, this is what I wanted. This one was fantastic. Author does a very, very good job of bringing sort of that cozy vibe with somewhat lower stakes, but still making you feel fully invested in what's happening in the character, and a sense of sort of like found family and romance, and just very, very good reads. So highly recommend this one. A holiday novella that I did really enjoy. I read Holiday by Gaslight by Mimi Matthews. And this was my first anything by Mimi Matthews, but it won't be my last. Like, I'll definitely try something else by this author. This one was a historical romance Christmas novella, and it was very cute. The main character and the love interest are actually already courting when the novella starts. But he's been so stilted and uncommunicative because he's of a slightly lower class and he doesn't know how to interact with sort of higher society, so he's trying very, very hard to be proper. He's so stilted that she thinks he's not really interested, so she breaks things off. And he's devastated because he's actually like really in love with her. And so when days later she realizes, like, I might have like, let's try again. He's kind of like baffled and a little bit hurt because his pride's a little bit hurt, but he's also like, yeah, let's take another shot. Maybe I can make it work this time. So she invites him to their family's like Christmas house party for the holiday, and he and his friend both come, and they have that forced proximity, and they get to know each other, and it was really cute, really well done. I really liked that one. So really glad I finally read that one. I've been trying to whittle down the horde of holiday books that I have, and this was a great one. So after that, I read what was my favorite book of the month, and that was Nightshade by Autumn Woods. This was spectacular. This was, I mean, I ripped through it. It is a dark academia set in the Scottish Highlands with like the best sort of modern Romeo and Juliet vibes. So our main character, Ophelia, which I love the old school name, but yeah, our main character, Ophelia, is going to this very prestigious university that her parents actually used to work at, and never ever wanted her to have anything to do with. But she decides to go on a scholarship because her parents died in a horrific accident, and she doesn't think it was truly an accident, so she wants to go and investigate. When she gets there, she meets the son of the guy that she thinks is responsible for her parents' death, and I mean, she immediately wants nothing to do with him because of the whole connection to her parents' death, but they are like inexorably drawn together and keep coming into contact with each other, and they're both just like stunned by each other's presence and can't stay away, even though they both know that they probably shouldn't be together for different reasons. But then as things unfold, she has a stalker, there's a lot of dangerous situations going on, there's like mafia involvement, there's a lot, and I loved every second of it. Like, it's dark, it's got dark themes, but it is utterly compelling. I cannot wait for the next book. I cannot wait for it. Okay, let's see. One of the books that I listened to during the month of November was Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. And this is one of the Cosmere novels that he wrote during the pandemic, his like pandemic projects, and they all have like a different tone. They're all kind of a standalone, but I mean connected to the larger Cosmere. And Tress of the Emerald Sea is one that he wrote specifically sort of for his wife, and you can tell it's got such a beautiful grown-up fairy tale quality. And there's all these little moments in the love story that feel as if it's Brandon actually talking to his wife, which is just so cute. But it's told in the voice, like as if Hoyd is telling you the story. So if you've read any of the Cosmere novels, you know that Hoyd is this character who's very involved in like the massive universal pivotal moments that will change the Cosmere in its entirety. He is this like magical being that bounces from place to place and gets involved in all kinds of things, and he's one of the side characters in this book, and he's telling you Tress's story, and it's just So good. Tress is a character who starts out as very like, she's a homebody, she's happy where she is, she loves to collect cups. She invents stories for where the cups came from, what happened to them. But her love gets taken away, and so she goes on this epic quest to rescue him and becomes more and more brave and competent and does these wild adventurous things and grows in all these ways. And the best part is when you get towards the end of the story, because it's a fairy tale romance, they come back together, but they both realize that they've grown from the people they used to be when they were initially in love, but that they both still hugely admire each other and love the new aspects of each other. And so it just becomes even more of like an adult, true lifetime romance. And it just, oh, I really loved this one. I loved it so much. Yeah, so good. I think this is my favorite Cosmere novel so far. All around, just so good. All right. After Tress, I listened to The Sunlit Man, which is another one of the pandemic Cosmere novels. And husband has been encouraging me to read all of these, and so we talk about them as I listen to them, like we do little updates. And one of the things I ended up telling him was I think I might have actually enjoyed The Sunlit Man more if I was physically reading it. I didn't really enjoy the audiobook itself, the listening experience, and part of it was some of the narration choices. Like, there is a character that's supposed to have a very toneless, emotionless sort of like voice, and it had this very thick, very Caribbean African accent. And it was just a very strange choice. And not only did I have trouble in the beginning understanding what this character was saying, but then as the story went on, I was like, the voice just didn't fit what was being described when they were talking. So it was very, very odd. And this particular book takes place in the future from the end of the Stormlight Archive and involves a character related to that series, but I can't tell you more because it spoils things. And it's a more sci-fi intense version of that part of the Cosmere. So the Stormlight Archive feels very sort of high fantasy, medieval society with some weird magic-based technological advancements. But this was like a planet elsewhere where there were like ships and guns and things like that, and this character's been bouncing around the Cosmere kind of like Hoyd does, and so I liked that it was different in that way, but again, I just had trouble getting into it. By like halfway through, I was invested in the story, but the first half I struggled with, and I think a lot of it was just the narration. So not my favorite in the Cosmere so far. They're all good. Brandon Sanderson doesn't really tell a bad story, but this just was not my favorite of the books I've read so far. So we'll see as we keep going through his backlist how I feel about other books and series. But yeah, The Sunlit Man is sort of lower on my list so far. Another one that was a little disappointing this month was Gully Washer by Kimbra Swain, and this one is book 5 in the Fairy Tales of a Trailer Park Queen series. So this is a urban fantasy series about a woman who lives in a trailer park, and in the first couple books you find out that she is essentially a fairy princess in hiding. She's in the mortal realm and she's living like, it sounds awful, but this white trash life so that she's like completely out of her father's control. And obviously things go wrong. We get connections, you know, we see all kinds of fairy tale creatures. And I really, really loved the first couple books in this series. And part of that, I think, was that I was listening to them as audiobooks, and the audiobooks were a really fun listen. The narration was great. They were clipping along at a fast pace. There was a lot going on, a lot of reveals. The last book, book 4, we had sort of like an epic climax to that book, and it was really exciting and it was really good. And then this book, book 5, sort of had that utter letdown that you get like in the middle of a trilogy when it's not really well written and you have that book that's just sort of like filling space. So this book, I just didn't really feel like, I mean, there were a couple spots towards the end where we got moments that sort of brought you back to that pace, to that sense of urgency, those sense of like compelling moments, but the majority of it, I was almost bored. So that was really disappointing. I own book 6 as an ebook, so I will probably try that one and see how I feel about it and then decide whether or not it's worth continuing the series. But this one just didn't do it for me. So I'm sad when I get this far into a series and then it just like peters out. The last book that I read in the month that I did really enjoy, it wasn't a 5-star read, but it was very good, like maybe a 4.25, The Lights of Prague by Nicole Jarvis. And this is a book that I have not seen anybody read but me. I was walking through the bookstore one day and I randomly picked it up off the shelf. I'm obsessed with the city of Prague, and that's where this one's set, obviously, and I just wanted to know what it was about, and when I read the description on the back, it sounded really interesting, so I'm glad I finally picked it up and actually read it. It is set in the late 1800s. It is a city where you have monsters roaming amongst the humans, unbeknownst to them. For the interruption, we heard something out the window and got a little upset. Look, it's you. Yeah. You see? Oh, that's my pretty girl Valentine. So in the city of Prague, again, there are lamplighters who go around the city at dusk and actually light the gas lamps. But part of their job as they patrol overnight and make sure the lamps stay lit is to also protect the humans in the city from the monsters who are roaming at night. So, Domek, one of our main characters, is a lamplighter and he hunts monsters at night. Our other main character, Aura, is one of the monsters. She's a Piavika, a type of Eastern European vampire, and she has been living amongst the humans unbeknownst to them. So, funny enough, Domek and Aura have met and have become friends and are engaged in a little flirtation. And as the story progresses and we learn more about what's sort of happening in the city, and that there is a group of Piavika who are attempting to gain new powers to be able to walk in the daylight. Aura and Domek find out about what each of the other is. And so now you're dealing with the Lamplighters trying to stop the Piavika, Aura trying to get away from the Piavika family that had controlled her, that she didn't want to be with anymore. The slightly shattered potential romance between the two main characters. The Lamplighters trying to gain control of Domek and something that he discovers along the way that could change another whole aspect of what's going on in the city. So there's a lot going on. I really, really loved the setting and the premise. The only thing that I didn't love about this book that sort of brought it from that potential 5-star down to, like I said, the 4.25 or so, was that there were so many different aspects of what was being explored through the plot, and the sort of like thematic things happening, that even though this book is a little over 400 pages, it felt like it needed to be longer, or 2 books, because like we didn't get a lot of emotional depth, especially in the first half of the book. Like there was so much explanation of just what was actually happening and what was going on and who existed in the city and what was happening, that I felt really disjointed from the 2 main characters. And then in the second half of the book, that got better, but there still just wasn't enough time, so to speak, left to really get into that. And I felt like, weirdly enough, you got a little more depth in Aura's backstory than anything else, which was great. Like, I loved that aspect of the story, but it just felt like everything else wasn't quite fleshed out enough. So I would have actually loved if this had been sort of like a duology, and we had really like dove into what was happening in the city in the first half of the book and like ended with them figuring out what each other was, and then the second half of the duology being the 2 of them reconciling the fact that they're on opposite sides of this epic monster battle, so to speak, and then having to figure out how to essentially save the city from all the dangers there were. So yeah, it just wasn't quite enough, but what was there was good. That's what I read in the month of November. Like I said, some of the books were really, really, really good. So like this was good. And then Three Kings was good. And then A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping and Nightshade were both excellent. Tress of the Emerald Sea was excellent. And then I had some ones that were less excellent, like The Christmas Swap and The Sunlit Man. And then I had my couple DNFs. So we were all over the place this month. But it was an interesting reading month. Like there was a lot of variety, a lot of different types of themes, different books. I was really glad to pick up some of the older books off my shelves because I've really been trying to do that, and like have my Read It or Unhaul It book and just make that decision for, finally on those books. December is a great reading month to end out the year, but we shall see. You'll have to come back at the end of December to find out. So, how was your reading in November? Did you have any spectacular books? Leave something as a recommendation in the comments. All right, have a good one.